This is something that I think you will note that I want your opinion about with the French community.
Sure.
I call it graduate student disease.
Okay.
Where you are conversant with the local language of how we talk.
Okay.
You have picked up vocabulary and are at least conversant enough that you can repeat the definition of it. And you are very desperate to be considered a big guy.
Sure. Absolutely.
So you are going to obfuscate. You're going to make the conversation more and more muddy using these vocabulary and imitating the speaking patterns of the people you consider authorities. And your presence in the conversation tends to make other people kind of baffled or feel like they aren't getting it as well as you do. And when that behavior, I was very familiar with that from academia. And because, by the time I started, by the time the Forge was founded, I co-founded it, I had already been a professor for years. So, I had been through a very extensive graduate program, been involved in faculty hires, had, run workshops and, done whole programs on my own at departments. And I'd watched graduate students, by then I'd watched graduate students cycle through multiple times. So I was very familiar with all this. And so I was old. I mean, I was already old back then. And so, I wasn't like a hot young snot on the internet. What happens with this, though, is it's very, very difficult. If you're talking about community, part of belonging to a community is a shared language.
Yeah.
And a sense of shared purpose. And one of the things about the Forge was that I wanted it to be cycle in, cycle out.
Oh, okay.
I mean, you didn't have to stay. Growing the community was not the priority.
Sure.
Try explaining that to people.
Yeah. Well, first of all, just let me say, to answer your questions, I don't pose myself as an historian of indie experimental RPG in France. I was just part of it.
Right.
So I'm going to speak a lot about France. About I'm not.
Let's see if I post this or not. Right. Go on.
Yeah. But and I've been for about 10 years, and it's certainly for me, the first thing was exactly what you described with PhD student legitimacy quest,
Yeah.
So we really wanted to, really had a shared common view on what we wanted to do. But we also wanted to be seen as having legitimacy, in particularly towards biggest actors of the sector in a way. So the thing is also we started. Christophe Buckley, whom you maybe remember, he and Sylvie Guillaume wrote Les Petites Choses Oubliées, which you mentioned.
Oh yeah, that's the one everybody hears about, right?
And so he founded Silent Drift, which was a very close imitation of the Forge on many ways. And
there was also a parallel at Italy as well, so that we have a couple of case studies of different things here. But go on. Yeah.
So, Silent Drift is still readable, but it's closed nowadays.
Right.
So, and he had similar issues as those you described. So I loved it For instance, I make very little use of social media or forums because it tends to really upset me. I don't feel very much secure on such platforms. But with a very tight moderation, things were much more interesting and much more productive. I felt, but it also came with a huge price on the moderator who had to do.
It killed me. I mean, it was brutal. I mean, I was a full-time professor, and in 2007 my twins were born.
Oh,
and
okay.
You know, it's also a political activist with a lot of you know, secondary activities there. And by 2010, I was a mess. So,
okay.
Yeah.
So
go on. Yeah.
But we were also so when I say we were also much younger in terms of age and in terms of perhaps RPG experience. I had been playing for about 10 years when I joined Silent Drift, and it's another 10 years from when I joined Silent Drift until today, so 2009, 2019.
What were the games you played before participating?
We played for 4 years, which seems absolutely incredible for me today. Warhammer. So we played a lot of Call of Cthulhu, which has a huge following in France.
Europe in general, it is the go-to game for Europe, I've found.
Absolutely. Legend of the Five Ring also. And we tried some more, I would say, experimental things, such as Amber.
That was my first guess. Yeah.
Yeah. And and also a game called, in English, it must be something like Murphy's World or The World of Murphy.
Right. Yes.
We played Earthbound too. And also a game called Meta Baron, which was from the comics of Mobius and Jodorowsky.
Right. I've always right. So it's based on the Meta Barons and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly. And so that was what I played before, but nothing very deeply experimental, such as what I did after that. But personally, I had a period of my life, and I was, this was during my master's degree or something, in which I felt that RPG. In a way, I wanted RPG to grow with me. So the themes, how I felt, how I would play, it wasn't interesting enough for me anymore.
I had two attempted divorces from role playing.
Yeah.
On that basis in my life, and each time I came back because I re-entered playing because I did somehow think that this could be an adequate form of expression. And each time, before I had hit a point where I said, we are not expressing. We're not, this is a hobby, but we might as well be collecting baseball cards. We might as well be doing anything else.
Exactly.
And this isn't really expression. And then it's a form of fandom.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. Fandom is exactly the word I would use too.
And I came back because I found like-minded people who felt the same way, and we said, "Let's try." Right? We know there's something. Let's try. And the fact that this was before the Forge, before I wrote, but that's the context in the 90s when I actually wrote Sorcerer and experimented with so many games that it led me to start doing things like considering Elves and Trollbabe. The expression of those as design correspond with the early Forge. but it arose out of positive experiences in play.
Sure.
So what I found, maybe that this is actually starting to make sense. I'm starting to articulate something, and I want to try it with you. As long as positive experiences in play, and that can include failed instances, if you feel like they have a positive impact. We're glad we tried. This doesn't work, but we're glad we tried. Or we made a good try. If you're having positive experiences with actual people playing, then the discourse continues to have a worthwhile foundation.
Yeah.
Without that, then the discourse becomes pretentious and has its own goals for being discourse of its own. Right? You have your own reasons to.
Yeah, self-replicatory in a way. So,
absolutely, and so the effect that I found was that when you had a lot of people arriving at the Forge, and many of them didn't have that basis for positive play, you would get a lot of pretense. People who would really avoid ever talking about really playing. I shifted it to say, we will no longer have, I use the term theory and so forth almost as just a joke, or at least, or at least for its self-aware limitations. Right? At least with the notion that, the real meaning of theory, as you know, is actually very grounded conclusions. That's not what most people mean by theory.
Yeah.
They mean the opposite for some reason. And so I knew, we said, we're going to call it RPG theory because what the hell? When you have 50 people enjoying talking with each other out of positive play experiences, then you can say theory and everybody knows that this is amusing. 5-6 years later, with 500 people, that's not the case. They're going to use that as an excuse to say, well, I don't have to talk about experiences and facts. I don't have to. I don't have to ground this in authenticity. And so I closed the forum called RPG Theory and the one called GNS Discussion, because I was really sick of that. And instead I said, you want to talk about that stuff, you're welcome to. And I want you to. But you're going to start with an actual play post.
Yeah.
And we're going to spin it from there. You're going to say, this was my experience in play, and I want to talk about gamism. This is my experience in play, and I want to talk about this structural stuff that, you guys have brought up before. But if and a lot of people hated that. And I knew who would hate it. Right? I knew. And it was, I think it was successful, but that required even more moderation. Even more. It cleared out a bunch of people that I was really sick of trying to seeing their impact on things. But you see, it was the expansion of the number of people coming in. It's the curse of all small businesses. Even though it wasn't a business, it made me no money at all. In retrospect, people would say, well, you made all this money off the Forge. You must have. And, because nobody would do anything like that today that wasn't monetized. But we didn't sell any advertising. We didn't, I didn't create an email bank and chop it up and sell it to things. I didn't even know such things existed. So the whole fucking thing was for free. And so, there I was, trying to cope with this. Here's the thing that also became an issue. When you talk about wanting legitimacy and to transform things, I kept trying to focus it on publication of your own work. And that was the only ideology. The Forge is ideological, but only for that purpose. Nothing else. There's no game content. Now, and if people wanted to vent and criticize and have opinions on what was good or bad, they could. But there wasn't a Forge ideology of what
Okay.
was good and what was bad.
Mhm.
This, of course, is a foreign thought to anybody who feels vaguely threatened by anything anyone says on it. It has to be ideological. They have to be against me. So the immediate, perception that this place is against me, right, is against real gaming, against D&D, against this and that.